This next segment is critical. More now on this report that the White House has downplayed the threat of more Russian election meddling, even as security officials work on another side of the government to prevent future attacks, to harden our defenses. This affects all of us. This is according to the Washington Post. Quote, for more than 2 years, Trump has recoiled when aides broached Russia's 2016 theft and dissemination of Democratic emails and its manipulation of social media in an effort to sway the election. The report goes on to say, during discussions in the Oval Office, Trump has regularly conflated the threat of foreign interference with attacks on the legitimacy of his election. It is a claim repeated often by Trump and members of his administration.
I want them to be sure that Russia or anybody else, that if it did happen, if there was any, and everybody also agrees, by the way, it didn't change the election.
It's very clear that Russia meddled in the election. It's also very clear that it didn't have an impact on the election.
The entire nonsense about the electors trying to use the Russian hacking issue to change the election results is really unfortunate. I think that actually undermines our democracy more than any other conversation that we're having right now.
You look at what Russia did, buying some Facebook ads to try to sow dissent and do it, and it's a terrible thing. But I think the investigations and all of the speculation that's happened for the last 2 years has had a much harsher impact on our democracy than a couple of Facebook ads.
Couple of Facebook ads, said the senior advisor to the president. Then there's this reminder from the Mueller report, quote, the Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systemic fashion. We'll let that hang out there as we bring in our guests. One of the reporters on this byline is with us, Shane Harris, intelligence and national security reporter for the Washington Post. And for good measure, Frank Figliuzzi is back with us. He is notably the former FBI assistant director for counterintelligence. Gentlemen, welcome. Shane, have at this any angle you wish. Let's start with how prepared or unprepared is our government? We just heard the FBI director last week call it the big event, talking about the next election. How prepared or unprepared are we, speaking to the citizens now, about the Russians who are already in our system, their ability to hack our next election?
Well, I think the good news is that if you look at the intelligence community, the FBI, the Homeland Security Department, there is a lot of progress being made. They're very aware of the threat and they're leaning into it. They're doing what they can, what they're obligated to do under the law, and importantly, communicating with social media companies. We saw so much pervasive manipulation of social media, and the government is trying to warn companies where they should be looking out for those kinds of threats and to hear back from them. What we don't have, though, at this point is a president who is engaged at this as a policy issue of utmost importance, which many of his advisors believe it is. He is out there talking publicly, downplaying it, recoiling it, as you pointed out, in private meetings as well. And when you don't have a commander-in-chief engaged from the top, the entire whole of government doesn't really work as a coordinated entity. I mean, imagine if after the 9/11 attacks, George W. Bush had come out publicly and said, I'm not so sure al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden were responsible for attacking New York and Washington with airplanes. And then quietly, the rest of the government was going around trying to stop terrorists. You get a sense of what a disconnect that would be. There's something analogous going on here, too, where the government is working very furiously, I think, behind the scenes, but you have a president who really is not engaged on that and kind of thinks that the entire enterprise is premised on a hoax.
And Frank, that's the disconnect you've been coming on this broadcast to talk about. I saw the president before rally audiences is now talking about purging the scum from the FBI, words we've never remotely associated with one of our presidents in the past. And I have this reading for you, Frank, from the Rosenstein letter. The new equivalent of, but how did you enjoy the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Our nation is safer. Our elections are more secure. And here's the fun part. Our citizens are better informed about covert foreign influence efforts and schemes. So, Frank, you get it. By dint of the coverage we've been giving it, we've got a big heads up to all the American people coming into 2020.
Well, he's right about one thing in the letter. The American public is indeed more informed about the threat to our electoral process and the security of it. And in part, by the way, Brian, because you continue to cover the story that's got to be told, and the American people have to demand answers. There's another reason why the president has got to come out and publicly denounce what Russia did with our elections. And I get the fact that if he does so, he's fearful that people will think that he got help and the electoral vote was changed and he's not a legitimate president. I get that. But here's the counterintelligence reason behind why he's got to come out and denounce this. Other nations are watching. They're watching his non-response. And just as we heard Michael Cohen and others talk about kind of that mob boss signaling that occurs without any real words being exchanged, and yet you know what to do and you get that green light, by not responding and denouncing and punishing Russia for what they did in the election, he's telling other nations, essentially, I'm okay with this. You help me out, I'll be okay. And let me assure you, foreign intelligence services salivate over the possibility that they could co-opt an American president by merely making him think that they helped win his re-election. That's why he's got to come out and denounce this, or we're going to look back at this time and wonder how we gave up our electoral process in this country.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of questions to answer for. Hey, Shane, I know the DNI is hanging on. I know the new CIA director is over in Langley, keeping her head down and doing her job as she has done all her career. At the White House level, you've got Mulvaney and Bolton, so some of the guardrails are gone. Who are the institutionalists closest to this president, maybe there are none, who are intent on getting the hard work done of hardening our defenses?
Well, actually, the outgoing, the now ex-Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen is someone people gave a lot of credit for trying to do the work of working with state and local governments, particularly, letting them know how to protect their systems and what to watch out for. But it's interesting, you mentioned John Bolton, the National Security Advisor. Our sources told us that she blamed him for not elevating this issue of election security high enough on the president's agenda and really trying to force him to buckle down on it. And was persuaded not to bring it up in meetings with the president for fear that he would simply disregard it or it would anger him. And whenever she did try and broach it, he would steer the conversation towards immigration. So within the White House, really that core group of people who are around the president, and really the president takes advice, we know, from himself. He doesn't really listen to a core group around him at that level on security issues the way other presidents have. You're not really seeing people who are trying to get him to focus on this and elevate it to the top of the issue set, and at least try and make it something in his mind that is as equal as immigration or border security, which are things that we know he cares a lot about.
And Frank, you get the last word. Let me take you one more step. Forget Vlad Putin, who may have already won. But let's talk about the thing that intelligence folks off-duty say to me is what you guys aren't covering is how kaleidoscopically China has drilled down into American society and intel and our public-facing structures. About the signal you just discussed, Frank, what this might say to bad operators around the world, what about a foreign power like that?
China presents a pervasive and persistent threat from a cyber perspective, and intelligence professionals, cyber professionals know that whether you're talking about corporate intrusion or intrusions into government agencies, they have done it. They've been there. They've done that. They've sent us the signal. They've said hello in an IT signature kind of way, and they present a pervasive threat. So if they decide to unleash their force and their sophistication, we'll be looking at this and just change the country's name from Russia to China. And by the way, you can change it to Iran or North Korea, depending on their mood and their relationship with this president. That's why the president needs to come out. And next time, they may decide to back the other party. And that's why Congress needs to come out and say, this is a nonpartisan issue. We're going to tackle this, and here's how.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.